You are listening to Footy Talk, your place for the latest news, interviews and analysis from the world of AFL. It is, of course, a Tuesday where we are always joined by my great mate over in the States, Nick Riewoldt. Rooey, this crazy AFL season got even crazier on the weekend with the results that we had. Port Adelaide off the canvas were able to find a way to win. Brisbane Lions, the second greatest comeback in a final, 44 points down to knock off the GWS Giants. Man, oh man, what a weekend.
Yeah, a couple of cracking games of football, a couple of storylines, subplots. It was all in there. And, the Brisbane result for me was just, like, I could see a scenario where Port Adelaide found their way to a victory at home against the plucky Hawks, given that, they had such a good season. They were back at home and they had a really big point to prove. But the Brisbane game, I couldn't believe, just, watching it unfold and then, of all players, to have the steely nerves to be able to go back and slot a couple of match winners. For me, it was probably undersold what he did, given his history in front of goal. I mean, as someone that had periods in their career where, you got the jitters in front of the big sticks, I think almost the fact that he had an opportunity from the boundary line where there's zero pressure might have helped him and just raised his confidence, Big Joe, because that's as clutch as you get. I'm not sure I've seen two clutch kicks ever like that in a big final. That was just awesome.
Yeah, I saw a quote from someone saying Joe Danaher is 50-50 from anywhere on the ground. He's got as much chance anywhere in front of goal or on the boundary. Yep. He's a 50-50 chance, and to go back and nail the two. And they didn't look like it for a big portion of that game, the Brisbane Lions, and somehow found a way. And we've got some cracking prelim finals now that we will get into in a moment. But you're right about the storylines. It was a big weekend for talking points and things that happened off the field. I want to start with you. I think the only person in Australia, well, you're not even in Australia, that hasn't had an opinion yet on the Ken Hinkley situation. I want to get your take. What did you make of the whole post-match exchange between Ken Hinkley and the Hawks?
I thought it was pretty funny, to be honest. Not Kenny's best moment. But pretty harmless at the same time from everything I've heard in terms of reports and what was said. But again, it looked like the sort of thing that it took about 5 or 10 seconds for him to think, oh shit, shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Like that's what it looked like to me. And then by the time he got to the rooms, the remorse had probably kicked in a little bit. I thought James Sicily handled it exactly like he should have as the Hawthorn captain. I thought Sam Mitchell was brilliant in his press conference, defending his players in what was a really disappointing circumstance for them. So I think everyone handled it as well as they probably could have, apart from Kenny. He'd want his time again. He'd wish he hadn't done it. And then, and then the AFL would probably want their time again as well, because I reckon it's been pretty heavy-handed.
Do you think so? I mean, the Ken Hinkley stuff, a lot of the great coaches have at one point or a couple of points in their career sort of carried on a bit too much, but that's the emotion of footy. It's why we love it. It's why we are all invested. But I'm interested that you think it was heavy-handed by the AFL, the $20,000 fine. I mean, my understanding, and there is some whispers, he may have thrown a swear word in at the end to Jack Ginnivan. That maybe is why the AFL have handed out the fine, but you didn't think they necessarily needed to give it?
I don't think they needed to give it. I mean, I think they'll market the absolute crap out of it come next year. I'd be shocked if Port Adelaide weren't playing Hawthorn in Gather Round or in the first game of the season, next year, either at the MCG or clearly in Adelaide if it's for Gather Round. But I think we got a precedent early in the year with the Al Clarkson one with Jimmy Webster. I mean, I think that was a level above. I don't think anyone would disagree with that in terms of what was directed at the player in the field of play, and that was $20,000. So I don't think there was parity there. And also, where does it give you to? I mean, in terms of what, like, if you scale up, like that means potentially we could have coaches being fined $100,000 for something really severe.
Well,
I think
if they get physical, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jace McCartney, did he get physical with Tom Papley?
Yeah, you could say that. You could,
yes. He only got 20.
Yeah.
So I just don't think there was consistency. I think just a don't do it again would have been enough. But the AFL will use it. I mean, they'll I don't think they're hypocrites by using it, because, I think they use any situation where there's any sort of conflict, no matter how severe. But I thought it was a little over the top. But gee, everyone had a say. Some of the criticism was pretty predictable. I think you obviously get an understanding as to where allegiances lie, and there's always a little bit of agenda or bias. I mean, Kane, an ex-Port Adelaide player, comes out, in strong defence of Ken, and then the old Hawthorn boys come out condemning Ken. So I think that sort of ping-pong back and forward is always pretty entertaining to watch. It almost becomes a sport in itself, the commentary back and forth. So I enjoyed it, Joey. I had a couple of good laughs.
Yep, so did I. I liked it, and we can all move forward now because, as we said, big games to come. But just quickly on the Hawks, what do you make overall of their season and what it means for, James Sicily obviously going to be disappointed to miss the opportunity to get them into a prelim, but what do you feel about the Hawks? Because I've always had the view when you are a team on the rebuild or building, it's never linear, your progression. It's obvious and easy for everyone to say, the Hawks will be better next year and they'll keep continuing to improve. But we've seen it time and time again with teams, and I was on record at the start of the year, Adelaide Crows were one that a lot of people thought would just make the 8 because that's the natural progression. It doesn't always work like that. They're going to get a harder fixture next year. They're going to be scouted more. They're not going to be sort of, sneaking under the radar. Missed opportunity for the Hawks. And what do you think of next year?
Yeah, I think the Saints were probably another one this year that, finished 6th last year, and a lot of people saw that organic growth with a young group would mean you just take another step forward. I think the thing that the Hawks do have strongly in their favour is from a recruiting standpoint. We know Battle's coming in and Barrassi's coming in, so straight away you get a bit of that lift. But you're right. There's peaks and troughs. So I think the same with the Giants to a certain extent is you can't just bank on the fact that you're going to be there again next year. There are some Hawthorn players where you only need 1 or 2 things to go wrong from an injury perspective, and they have such an impact on that group that they would be a huge loss. So that's why, premierships are so hard to win when you're there, when you're in the window, and when you have the opportunity. And the Hawks were in as good a form as anyone out of the last 6 teams. You got to take it when you can, because getting back there is zero guarantee. Now, if I was a betting man, I'd be saying, I'd love the Hawks for top 4 next year. But stranger things have happened. We've seen it go pear-shaped before.
Nah, spot on, Rooey. Hey, just a quick one on Port Adelaide using Jack Ginnivan's comments. I want your take, because I've been surprised by some people, and I think most of the people that would say this haven't actually played. But to say that you can't use that comment as motivation, forget that this is what coaches do every single week, every single year, is they tell a story, they use an analogy, they use something. It's not to say, this is the reason they're going to win, but coaches use something most weeks to get players to an arousal level or motivated to perform at their best. So I'm not surprised at all that Port Adelaide used it. It makes sense. That's what coaches do. What's your take on Port Adelaide having it on the whiteboard and using that, even if it's just for the 1% that might have been the difference?
Coaches use the craziest things you've ever heard every week. Imagine every week having to come in and sell the group a message and try to get them motivated every week. So anytime you get a tiny little nugget, of course you're going to use it. You're going to use it to fuel your playing group. Damien Hardwick through the Richmond era where they were winning flags. Every week there was a new theme. Every week, they at some point he'd have something on the seats in front of the lockers. He had a barrel of monkeys and a link in the chain and jerseys from other sports and other codes, and there was always a message. We've heard Craig McRae, some of the stuff that's come out of Collingwood.
Luke Beveridge does some crazy. He uses bands and music and songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ross Lyon used to come in every week, and he probably wasn't that creative, Rossi, because he went with the same thing most week, and that was at Geelong. So we were chasing Geelong, and every week he'd come in and he'd write, okay, 47 out of the last 49 games, Geelong have ticked it off. They've done it again. What are you boys going to do next week? 48 out of 50. I was, all right, Rossi, come up with something new. You're boring us. Grant Thomas, I can remember talking about chasing, and would you, is that as hard as you could chase? He'd show the vision on the film, and then, he'd ask one of the blokes with a kid, Well, so you're telling me if someone came in, grabbed your kid off the couch and ran out through the front door, you wouldn't run harder than you're running there when you're trying to chase someone? So they do it all the time, coaches. They'll pull on any thread they can, and I don't blame Port Adelaide for using this one. No,
that's right. And in the end, it might have just been enough. It might have been the 1% they needed to get over the line. We spoke about it last week, Rooey, that they would use it, and certainly they did, and they've been public about that. Hey, we'll move on because I'll tell you what, for the teams that aren't playing finals, it is silly season. And because trade news has become such a big market in media, they get a lot of clicks, a lot of clickbait. Gee, it's amazing, isn't it? Just there's a little whiff of a player that might just entertain a conversation from another club, and that can become a story. The latest has been Zach Merrett. He was linked to St Kilda. I think both clubs, Essendon and St Kilda, have been pretty quick to shoot it down. But it just goes to show now that that some journalists or some people in the media are going to sniff out any little crack in a player because they know that it clicks, because people love this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and that's what it's about. Obviously, it's about the clicks. And I read that one, and I like, without even clicking on the article, I was like, "There's no way that's true."
Yep.
Someone might have said, "Oh, Zach Merrett completely happy at the Bombers. Bombers might have gone. His agent might have gone, yep," and that would have been the end of it. But there's you pour a little bit of fuel on it, and it all of a sudden turns into an article. So that won't be the first. It won't be the last, Joey. Over the next few months, we anticipate what is going to be a pretty bumper trade period with some of the names being floated around. One of the big ones, Joey, and I'm interested in your take on this. He's retired, but is there any chance that we see Dusty Martin again?
This is the one, the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it, for those in the media? Because any time that there's a Dusty involved, people want to read it and find out about it. Now, look, my understanding, and Roo, we know people that are friends with Dustin and around. There's a very, very slim chance, like a small chance that he might entertain an opportunity to play at the Gold Coast, but it's almost certain that he won't. But because there is that tiny little percentage, everyone's trying to generate a story and make out like he's going to go play for the Gold Coast Suns. And now the story is, he basically backed off this year at Richmond because he's saving himself for Gold Coast. That's where these stories grow legs.
He's become about as valuable to the Herald Sun as Beck Judd and Nadia Bartel, Dustin Martin, hasn't he? Like, you put his name in any sort of headline and you just know people are going to click on it.
And it's great with Dustin because there's no rebuttal from him or his camp. So they know they can say anything about Dustin and it's not going to get shot down because they just don't talk.
Yeah.
So, look, there's almost no chance that he will play for Gold Coast. My understanding, and probably rightly so, is Damien Hardwick's been in his ear since about mid-year. Hey, come up to the Gold Coast, great environment, and that's fair enough. And it's okay for Dustin to speak to his great mate Damien Hardwick and maybe listen. That doesn't mean that he's going to be putting on the jersey next year. I'll be very surprised if he does, but I'm not surprised that the stories will keep getting bandied around until the very last day of trade period. Hey, speaking of Dustin Martin, he is a Brownlow medalist. It is the Brownlow on Monday night, so we won't be back on till next Tuesday, so we will miss it. Have you got a little thought on who you think will win the Brownlow?
Depending on how many votes Adam Treloar polls.
Treloar?
I think Treloar is the greatest threat to Bontempelli.
Right.
So I think if Treloar doesn't poll threes, he gets the twos, then I think Bont will win what would be a very deserving Brownlow medal. But if Treloar, he's the only one I'm worried about stealing votes off Bont.
I'll tell you what, Adam Treloar will poll a lot of Brownlow votes. You can take that to the bank. He'll poll in the 20s, Adam Treloar. Now, whether he polls enough to cost Marcus Bontempelli, for me, it has become a two-horse race. In the end, particularly with Nick Dacos and Paddy Cripps polling votes in the rounds 23 and round 24, I think you can safely say, in my opinion, that those two will be fighting it out, and it'll be neck and neck. It will go right down to the last round. We know Nick Dacos will poll 3 votes in the final round of the year against Richmond. That we spoke about it. That was the only reason he was running around getting 40 touches, because he knew the Brownlow was on the line. Cripps played against St Kilda and should poll votes. It's just going to be interesting to see how many he polls in that final round, but I think 1 vote from him in that round will be enough to win the Brownlow medal, but it's going to be a great count. Cripps v. Dacos, how good is that?
Dacos is in front going into the last round, he wins.
Well, they will set it up so that Dacos will be a couple behind. Then they'll do round 24, and then it'll be Richmond v. Collingwood, 3 votes, and Dacos. He'll go over Cripps, and then I think Cripps will be the final name read out in round 24, St Kilda v. Carlton. Hey,
you going?
No, I won't go. No, don't go to the Brownlow. I enjoy watching it on TV. No. Hey, let's just have a quick look to the 2 prelims going this weekend. Friday night, Sydney v Port Adelaide. Now, this is fascinating, Rooey, because Port Adelaide have beaten Sydney Swans the last 8 times they've met. They played about 6 weeks ago, and they beat them by 112 points. Is there anything in the Sydney Swans psyche that does play a factor, or do you believe what's happened in the past is irrelevant and it won't matter? Or is there sometimes a team that, for whatever reason, is just in your head?
I think that's real. I think there are teams that, for whatever reason, whether it's matchups, whether it's their style, that you just have a little bit more difficulty with than others. So yeah, there would be some concern there. I think there would be an understanding that from the Swans players that was right in the middle of what was just a bad patch that no one saw coming, and that they found really difficult to get out of. But when they did, they haven't been a shell of themselves. They've gotten back to that early season form. But this was a middle of a really, really rough patch. But yeah, I think it can play. Whether it's 1 or 2%, play a few mind games on the players. I'm excited about this one. I think the midfield contest. This is about as good as you get when you think about a midfield contest deciding the game. I know we always say it'll be decided in the middle. This is the ultimate example of that. Port Adelaide is such a territory-based team, and the Swans superstars are all in the middle of the ground. So I'm pumped about this one, Joey.
Yeah, I think everyone just sort of presumes that this is one that Sydney just tick off and get through to grand final. I've done some preps, I've done some work yesterday, Roo, and I'm telling you what, Port Adelaide, I've got a sneaky feel they could give this an almighty shake. They could make this an arm wrestle, and if they could pull this off, my God, wouldn't that throw the season on its head? Canning Hinkley getting into a grand final. Hey, just one on that. I know you spoke about the midfield battle, but does Port Adelaide pick Charlie Dixon? So he was a laid out last week. Now, was it the contentious laid out because they did pick the 4 tools with Todd Marshall and Rattigalea and Georgiades forward? It felt like there was going to be a late change. Coincidentally, there was the old, Dixon was feeling unwell. Todd Marshall now out with concussion. Charlie Dixon was horrible in the game against Geelong. Just could not compete in the air, couldn't do anything at ground level, and provided nothing. Does Ken Hinkley go to the well with Charlie Dixon one more time?
Don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think you want ground level, you want pressure. You back Georgiades in, you back Rattigalea in. I thought Georgiades, particularly late in the game, was really important. He looked really good. Hits the scoreboard a few times late. That was really important. I'd back the mobility, the flexibility, play another runner, and as long as you're getting the ball on the deck, I think that's where the value and the contest on the ground is going to be more important than in the air, assuming those other 2 big boys can get the job done.
That's going to be a massive talking point. Looking forward to seeing how Port Adelaide select that side. But yeah, it's going to be a great one. What about the other 8 prelim? Brisbane and Geelong, 2 teams that have played a lot of finals footy. In fact, they've met in the prelim twice in the last 3 or 4 years, and both times Geelong have done a number on Brisbane Lions. This has got a feel of Chris Scott coming up with something again against the Brisbane Lions team to try and just find a way to orchestrate a win and another grand final appearance for the Cats.
Yeah, one thing I can promise you Chris Scott won't do is he won't let Dane Zorko run around half-back having 30 touches. I think he's been such an important architect. We've spoken about the way Chris Scott coaches. He almost makes the opposition play left-handed, and he's been so successful in doing it. So, yeah, it's kind of... It almost beggars belief that you're sitting here talking about Geelong, with all of the changeover in personnel, no Joel Selwood, no Tom Hawkins. I mean, it's almost inconceivable to think that they're on the verge of another grand final. But, gee, back at the G, Brisbane, their form there has been up and down. I think, last year was probably the year where they put it to bed with their grand final performance. It was really strong. But it's a big ask. What tickets did they spend on the weekend coming from 44 back to climb over the top of the Giants? How euphoric that was. I heard, I can't remember who it was, but I heard one of the Brisbane players saying, I reckon this is as good as it gets in terms of a feeling after the game. it concerned me just a little bit. I don't know why, but I just thought, well, I reckon winning a flag would probably feel a bit better than winning a semi-final. I understand where they were going with it, but gee, I like the Cats. I like the Cats in this one.
Well, Brisbane have got the talent. That is undeniable. And that's how they got themselves back into that game, was just talent, really, and players stepping up and having moments. We spoke about Joe Danaher, but Zorko kicking a couple, Will Ashcroft, Zach Bailey, who'd been quiet, bobbing up with a goal. That is what the Brisbane Lions do. That'll be a cracking prelim. I'll be doing that one for Triple M. Looking forward to it on Saturday afternoon. Hey, we will take a break, Rooey, because we do want to get into real talk, talk straight after this. You are listening to Footy Talk. If you are listening on Spotify, please hit the bell and be notified when we drop a new episode. You are listening to Footy Talk. Check us out on Instagram at footytalk_pod. I'm here with Nick Riewoldt. We're going to play a bit of real talk, shit talk, Rooey, where we just throw around some comments that have been made in the last 48 hours and get your take on that. The first one for you is that GWS will not recover next year after their traumatic straight sets exits. Real or shit talk?
Oh, no, I think they will. I think they've got too much talent. They're too young. They've got too much upside to let that define them. It's as good an opportunity as you get. And, back-to-back years, prelim against Collingwood that, arguably could have gone the other way, and then the lead that they coughed up on the weekend. But no, I don't think it's terminal yet for them. I think they've got enough growth within them, good leadership. That's one that's going to be a watch, but I'd expect them to be able to recover and go again for another campaign under the coaching of Adam Kingsley. Hey, Joey, Jack Ginnivan, I think he just makes fun of the rest of us, to be honest. It's Jack's world and we're just living in it. He should send a tweet to Port Adelaide and Ken Hinkley if the Power lose on the weekend.
Rooey, that's mischievous. No, he should. Well, no, actually, I shouldn't say. I would love to see it. It would be hilarious. There's no chance in the world that he's going to tweet anything. He should send a tweet on the Port Adelaide Instagram and say, "Good luck this week, Port," or something like that, like a bit more tongue-in-cheek, a bit more fun.
That'd be good.
Rather than waiting till they lose. That's not cool. But imagine if he just said, good luck, Kenny and the Power Boys, and just stir the pot one more time. That'd be great. But no,
I reckon he'll do something.
He will not, Rooey. Don't go there. Hey, Tom Hawkins, we spoke about Charlie Dixon, and you think that Port Adelaide should leave him out. What about Tom Hawkins and the Cats? If he's 100% fit and he's played a VFL game and he's had a few more weeks of training under the belt, he is in Geelong's best 22. Real or shit talk?
Oh, look, I think even when he was fit before the injury, he was starting to struggle a little bit, Tom. And Geelong's form when he went out of the side, for whatever reason, I mean, it might be pure coincidence, but I think you got to go with what's had you in really good form over the last couple of months. And Shannon Neal up there has been really good. I don't think Tom could be 100% fit off this prep. So I would be surprised to see him get the call up. I think go with the settled lineup. Go with what's working. I like the sentiment around it. I love Tom. Tom Hawkins' best is obviously good enough, but I just don't think he can provide that at this stage. Last one for you, Joey. AFL players. This is always a hot debating topic at this time of year. They've got too much power when it comes to trade negotiations.
Well, Probably, but that's okay. It's their job, it's their business, and they've only got a short lifespan, so I've got no problem with it. It's probably more the player managers than the actual players, because there are only really a handful of management groups, and they control the whole industry. They can manipulate their players and the market and that sort of thing. So that is something that maybe the AFL need to look into, but from a player's point of view, good luck to them. They are allowed to try and maximise their opportunities while they are playing. Hey, that's all we've got time for. We've got to get a move on. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Really great to see you as always. This has been Footy Talk. Of course, tomorrow Abby Holmes will be with Jack Heverin and David Zaharakis. But until then, enjoy your Tuesday. Thanks for watching Footy Talk. Subscribe to the channel to watch myself and Rooey every Tuesday.